begin this Hawcf general meeting. And tonight we're going to have discussion, or a presentation on the Florida amendments. And this presentation will be by Janet Stevens and her colleague Jerry Weeks. The amendments are a critical part, or an important part of the upcoming presidential election that will be on the same ballot. And some materials she's handing out we'll discuss afterwards. So if there's some confusion, if you have any questions, let's try to hold them till the end, unless it's an important question that helps you to continue to understand it.
And,
so,
I have a master's in healthcare administration, and I've been in that field for a while. And Jerry is with the League of Women Voters, and he proves what?
Yay!
That men are involved in the League of Women Voters.
Right.
Very involved. And Jerry also has his master's in public administration and his undergraduate in political science, and has been 35 years in Army, Veterans Affairs, Veterans Administration.
Excellent.
Yeah, good. All right. So, as Jim said, we've got these 11 amendments on the ballot, and they do affect anything from revenue, rights to privacy, and several other issues. So I'm glad you're here so that we can talk about them. All right, Jerry. We didn't test this, did we? That's weird. All right. Oh, do you have a numbers lock key or something? Is it on the numbers? Yes, that's fine. Okay, let's use this for a minute. So, so the mouse will come into shape in just a moment. But in Florida, the Constitution in most places is used for your basic governing rules of the state. However, in Florida, we like to put all kinds of things in our Constitution. So we put things like all these tax exemptions. We put things like classroom size in it. So you'll see as we go through the 11 amendments to think about, does this belong in a constitution, or should it be something that should just be legislated? So with a constitutional amendment, they can be put up by citizens. It has gotten a little harder for citizens to do constitutional amendments. All these have been put forth by the legislature. They are require 60% vote to get an amendment passed. Likewise, if at some point you wanted to take one off, it would require 60% vote. All right, that's better. Okay. Well, you pop it fast. Go ahead.
Ooh, what'd you get on with
Right? Actually, this is working.
it? No, but it jumped us. Oh, no, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. She had it going and I messed it up. Okay, we'll start with, won't go through them in sequence, because a bunch of them deal with tax exemptions, homestead exemptions, things like that. So try to get that covered in a group right at the beginning. But one of the requirements is that when they went into service, that they were Florida residents. If Amendment 2 passes, then it will do away with that requirement, and any disabled veteran who moves into Florida would then be eligible. The amount of the exemption is based on their disability rating given by VA. So if they have a 50% disability rating, then they have 50% exemption. Amendment 9 deals with surviving spouses of veterans who died in line of duty, and Amendment 9 would then add surviving spouses of first responders. And I'll try to hit those and not get things too complicated. The first point deals with non-homestead properties. This is commercial property owners, second homes. Currently there's a cap on these properties, the assessed value from year to year cannot be more than 10%. Well, this would reduce that 10% cap down to a 5%.
So this amendment would have no practical implications whatsoever, because it would go through the courts then. If it was a yes vote that passed, it would go through the courts and be ruled unconstitutional. What it does at most is it could serve as a referendum kind of how many people support an individual mandate and how many people oppose it. Wouldn't necessarily be an accurate count of that either. So, and I think I've already covered this stuff. Unconstitutional. So obviously if it's a no, it means that we comply with federal health law, and that there's no conflict in the Constitution, and it would allow the enactment of potential Florida laws that require health care coverage if there's a no vote on that. So this is Amendment 3, which has to do with state government revenue limitation, and it's an attempt to impose a new formula for calculating the state's revenue cap. So currently we have a revenue limitation that is based on personal income growth. And this would replace this with a new, more restrictive limitation, which is based on population and inflation. So it would replace the, it would restrict the government revenues, which this includes taxes, licenses, fees, fines, or charges for services, in good and poor economic times. It would limit the legislature's ability to increase revenue beyond what the formula allows. And one of the other things, if there is in fact excess revenue collected beyond what this cap allows, that money would be returned to taxpayers, is the idea here. So if you voted no on this amendment, you would maintain the existing limitation that's already in place, that's based on personal income growth. And you protect the state's ability to provide the current level of government services, as well as preserve the legislature's current flexibility in responding to budgetary concerns and changing economic conditions. So in Colorado is the only state that has ever implemented this. And in Colorado it was called TABOR, which stood for Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. Colorado adopted it in 19...
deals with state courts, has implications for balance of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, and the independence of the judicial branch. Currently, the governor fills positions on the Supreme Court and the appellate courts from a list that's provided to him by a judicial nominating commission, which is in place to do this. What Amendment 5, a yes vote, would do is require State Senate to confirm or reject a gubernatorial appointment. It would allow the legislature to repeal judicial rules. These are rules that the judiciary branch sets up for themselves as far as operating. Now, currently the legislature can repeal these, but it takes a 2/3 vote. This amendment would allow them to do it with a simple majority. It also would expand the House's access to confidential files that judges have and about judges. And right now, they can only have access to those kinds of files when there's an impeachment process going on. But this would allow them essentially to go on a fishing expedition. And so a no vote would maintain the current method of selecting justices, would continue to require the 2/3 to repeal any judicial rules and require it to be part of an impeachment processing to get to individual confidential files. Now, supporters of this amendment say it would bring much needed change to a court system that gives the governor particularly a lot of power. Opponents say the measure is a dangerous attempt to exert political influence over the judicial branch by giving politicians more authority. And in fact, I don't know if you remember, back when the legislature was in session, they had introduced some very far-reaching judicial or legislation that would affect the judicial branch, even splitting the Supreme Court into two different courts. The criminal and the civil branch would allow the governor to appoint all new judges for that, and this is basically what's left of that attempt at legislation. It got defeated, and so they attempted to try to bring this before the people to get it implemented. Next amendment is Amendment 6. Dual title here, prohibition on public funding of opponents say it is a preemptive strike on a woman's right to choose. Did I do 2 there?
You did.
Okay.
So, we have skipped 7 for a good reason. 7, went to the Supreme Court, it went to, right?
The Florida Supreme Court.
Yeah, the Florida Supreme Court. And the wording on it was not okay. So someone polished up the wording a little bit, and you can't reuse a number, so it came back as 8. So, and the wording is still rather misleading. So, I think I could ask most any group in the country, not just this group, to say, are you for religious freedom? And groups would say, yes. But that's really not what this is about. So, basically, what this is, it attempts to repeal a 126-year-old provision in the state constitution that prohibits taxpayer funding of religious institutions. So, it's called the no-aid provision. And then to allow public money to go to private religious institutions. Now, money already goes to religious institutions like Catholic charities. It goes to those institutions for things like social services, preschool, as long as those religious institutions are not promoting their religion in those services that they are providing. So there is already taxpayer money going to churches, but not for any piece that promotes religion. One of the things that would happen if there were to be a yes vote on this would be the expansion of Florida's school voucher program to religious institutions, which could result in money being directed to private religious schools, any kind of private religious schools, at the expense of the public schools. It would allow for a greater number of religious programs to be supported by taxpayer funding, but it's mainly going to be, I would think, schools. So if you voted no, it would keep what's in place now, that the money can go for non-religious programs. And it would maintain the constitutional provision the courts have cited when rejecting school voucher programs that fund religiously affiliated schools. And it maintains the separation of church and state, which is provided in our state constitution since 1885.